We go. And five, four, three, two, one. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. I feel so privileged and honored to be in this discussion. As you met Dr. Eliza Pressman last week, and someone you may know from my feed, who I collaborate with often. And we wanted to engage in the necessary and important conversation that is happening in our world right now. And someone that we happened to actually speak about last week is someone that we're lucky enough to talk to this week. And with that, I want to turn it over to Eliza and Britt. And do you mind, for anyone watching, if you guys would describe your background and your expertise so that anyone watching can just relax into the conversation and know exactly what it is that you two extraordinary women do. Eliza, I'll start with you.
Okay, I'm a developmental psychologist. I'm the co-founder of the Mount Sinai Parenting Center and on faculty at Mount Sinai School of Medicine. And I have a private practice called Seedlings Group and a podcast called Raising Good Humans.
And someone that you happened to speak about as someone that you respect so much last week.
I really want to learn from, I was sort of lightly stalking Britt. So I'm so honored to be able to be part of this conversation.
Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really, really honored to be here. And if I am new to you, I'm Britt Hawthorne. My pronouns are she, her. Professionally, I'm a nationally recognized anti-bias, anti-racist teacher educator, which means I have the absolute honor and responsibility, privilege to work with classroom teachers all across the country to raise awareness about racism and bias that does in fact exist in our teaching practice. So together we interrogate where are racist practices existing, and then together we partner to create action-oriented next steps so that the classroom can truly be inclusive and equitable. But also on a more personal note, I am a mama. I have two children, 13 and 7. We call them artists. They are boys, and I homeschool the youngest. I've been homeschooling him for 3 years as an act of resistance against white supremacy.
One of my questions, actually, if you don't mind, I'll just throw it out now and then Eliza ask the next one. But I was wondering, as a homeschooler myself, as of recent, not knowing if I'm still continuing this, what is something that parents can, who are, a lot of kids are going to be in homeschool until the end of the month, and then we go into summer, but just in general, in a homeschooling and obviously ongoing context, but in a homeschooling context, how can we bring this conversation and illumination and anti-racism into homeschooling for parents like us who have never done homeschooling before?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I have been an anti-racist parent. I am what I consider parenting in an anti-racist way for, probably intentionally the last 4 to 5 years. And there's a great framework. It's called Anti-Bias Education, and it was developed by 2 women, Louise Sturman Sparks and Julie Olson Edwards. And so it's 4 goals, and that's really how we live our homeschooling journey as anti-racist, anti-biased caregivers. And the first goal says that we want children who feel affirmed in their many identities. So we do activities, we ask questions, we want them to feel good about who they are. We want them to feel good about us as their family, their language, their culture, the food we eat, the music we listen to. The second goal says we want them to embrace differences. We want them to have accurate language for differences. And so we also intentionally create diverse experiences for our children. And we're always thinking about how can we, even if it's small changes, different grocery stores that we can go to. So we can ask questions like, what do you notice about this grocery store? Do they have the same kinds of food? Does the lighting look the same? Does the tile look the same? And then the next goal says that we want children to be able to identify unfairness and bias and know that that unfairness and bias, it hurts. And then the last and final steps is we want our children to be able to advocate against the unfairness and bias for ourselves and also for our families and for our neighbors. And so that's kind of like thinking about where, like Drew or Lisa, you can think like, where have I done that already? How do my children feel really good about themselves? How have we created an intentional diverse universe? Right now with the killings of George Floyd, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, and so many, how have we acknowledged that this is in fact unfair and that it hurts all of us? It hurts our communities. And then what in fact can we advocate against that? So I would say that's probably a really good start.
And can I ask a quick question, Drew?
Please.
Okay. So you said something that really struck me, that you are homeschooling your 7-year-olds very specifically in a way that I'm wondering how, if you're not homeschooling, although we are all at home for a really long time. And I think that we should dive into the kinds of things that the activities that you can do if you can't go to different grocery stores right now, or if you're, sheltered in place still in certain places. But I'm also wondering if you have white kids in a predominantly white neighborhood, because only, is it 5% of white kids are actually in diverse communities in the entire country? So how can you, is that choice that you've made to homeschool, is it going to take that kind of act to raise anti-racist kids? Or are there things that we can do knowing that they're not in a diverse community, even, we're in New York, but it's still segregated?
I think for white families, no, that you don't have to. I think for families of color, Indigenous, Black families of color, then yes, because there's a power dynamic that's different. There's that graphic that's going around that shows the amount of people that are in US Congress and Senate and presidents and even classroom teachers. Now, all of those are dominated by white folks, white passing folks, white presenting folks. So since the power is there, then you don't have to make such a, what I would consider a radical act. Instead, you can just talk to your neighbors, you can talk to your colleagues and your coworkers and say, how can we instead redesign policies and practices to make this inclusive? I think when you have white children, oftentimes, there's this fear of, I don't want them to have a positive white identity in the sense of white pride, right? But we want children to have a positive identity. And we want them to have a positive white identity that doesn't mean, like, what does it mean to have a white identity when it has no relation to racism, when it has no relation to superiority or inferiority? Like, how can I be proud of who I am and feel good about who I am? How can I affirm my child's skin tone, right? And it doesn't have to be the hard history of a white racialized identity. But there's also so many incredible white anti-racist folks that are in our history that have been abolitionists, that have taken up arms with us and have pushed forward. And so thinking about those narratives, and if we don't know the narratives, because by design, they are not taught in school. So if we don't know the narratives, like, that's a great place to start. Like, where can I start to find examples of white anti-racist people in history? Find books, read about them. That would probably be a really, really good start.
You mentioned skin tone. When people are trying to get it absolutely perfect and correct this time, and from here on out, what is the right way to teach our children exact description of skin tone?
Yes. So, okay, we'll break it into 2 categories. And Lisa, you might even have more to add to this. So 0 to 6, we talk about skin tone or shade or color. And here it goes. I came prepared. So there's a good book that I do recommend. It's called Different, Differenter. And this is an activity book. Can y'all see that?
Is that by the same person? Okay, it's interesting. That looks like it must be the same imprint of some other children's books I collect. I cannot wait to get my hands on this book.
Book is a great book. And I would say this book is great for children under 8 years old. And it even has one of these questions, do you know what makes skin brown? Right, so it's always in anti-racist parenting, we're always asking children questions, we're really curious. And so, and then we talk about pigment, we talk about melanin. It's very scientific about, everyone has melanin. Some people have more melanin than others. And your ancestors or your family will dictate how much melanin you have. We talk about skin as the largest organ, external organ. We talk about how skin is really healthy and good. And we all have skin. Have you ever thought about what it would be like if you didn't have any skin? And that's silly. So we want to normalize that we all have skin, but we do have different shades of skin. And so in this book, there's a great activity. I've been doing it for years where children actually get to make their own skin tone, their shade using paints. So they mix paints together, and boys typically really like this activity because they've seen a woman in their family, or they've seen someone in their family who uses makeup, and they're like, oh, I'm being like so-and-so. So they get to make their skin tone, they paint it on, you say, oh, is it just right? Do we need to add a little more brown, add a little more white? And then after they have their shade, in anti-bias education, what we do is we actually have the children name it themselves. So they bottle it up in like a little 1-ounce bottle, and we'll say, what shade do you think you are? They might say, I'm sand, or I'm my mom's latte, or, they just kind of like look around, and then you write it on the bottle and you say, that is your skin tone. So it's very empowering. And then when a child is around the ages of 6 to 7 is when you can have the child self-identify their racialized identity. Because when we introduce racialized identity, we want to introduce the history of it, right? So we have these categories of different races. We talk about how they're actually all made up, right? There's no biological indicator of race, but people have categorized human beings into these different categories. And the reason why we talk about them is because they have huge negative impacts for some groups and positive impacts for others. And then when a child is around 4 years old, 4 to 5, what you could do is you could talk about other people's racialized identity. So you could say, Dr. King identifies as a Black man, or Oprah identifies as an African American. That's always kind of a big question, like, do I use Black or African American?
Yes, and we've been given information over the years, and we've also found out that some of that information is wrong. So in ongoing, how to get it right from here on out.
And that's at a very young age. Like I will say our youngest, Kobe, he learned around 4.5 to start asking the question, how do you identify? So we might be at the playground and, later on we're going to come home and we're going to draw a picture. And so he might go up to a child and say, do you know your skin tone? Or how do you identify? So when we come home, he can accurately do that. That really goes back to like embracing differences. And as the caregiver, that means we have to normalize the fact that, hey, we're all different. I'm different. You're different. She's different. And that's okay. It's okay to see similarities. It's okay to see differences. What's not okay is the way we react to difference in a negative way. But difference is beautiful.
Well, that's interesting because something Eliza does for parents is talk about emotions. And I know that's something from your background that I understood, is that you created a daycare when you were younger and you had file folders to identify and classify, milestones and activities, but emotions. And one of the things that I've watched Eliza do for many years is talk about emotions, the scientific data, researched sort of evidence of how our brains function, what our brains developmentally are doing in children in certain ages, how we can react as parents. That shows a good example of how to handle emotions and like helps regulate us to react with more grace and calm than when things are heated up, we get spun out too. And Eliza's been so instrumental for a lot of parents in talking about emotions. Can you guys speak to that? The emotions parents and children are feeling right now, and what is a good route of grace through that?
Lisa, I'll let you go first.
I mean, I just want to listen to you, Brett. It's so funny. I'm like, no, you. I really, I think right now, your skin color has an impact on the emotions you're experiencing. It does all the time, but particularly right now, things are happening. Everybody's having a different reaction. My only feedback for anything related to our adult emotion is to make sure that our children feel safe, that we know how to manage our emotions. As long as they know that we're going to be okay, whether we're really upset and crying or laughing hysterically or angry, if they know, hey, look, I know I look really sad or I know I look really angry, it's because I am, but I also know that I will not always be really angry and really sad. This is a feeling, and feelings come and go. And right now, I just need you to know that I'll take care of me. I take care of my feelings. You don't have to take care of my feelings. And then you can take care of your kids' feelings. Right now, with so many big feelings, parents are feeling either guilty that they're not able to be emotionally centered and super chill with their kids. And you don't need to feel guilty about that. You just need to check in with your own emotional experience and make sure your kids know you are safe. I've got this. Even if I'm upset, my upset is something that my grown-up self knows how to manage. And the rest is, each person's own personal experience.
And I think just echoing everything you said, what's really important is for young children to know that emotions are fluid, right? They're dynamic. We move through them. There's no such thing as a bad emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to feel it, and you don't have to judge it. Oh gosh, there was something else I was going to. Oh, but something that white families can do and they can model really well is being able to say, this is how I'm feeling. And naming their feeling, especially if they are feeling guilty, they are feeling bad, they feel ashamed, being able to name that and say, and I know that that doesn't compare to what it means to experience the said discrimination, the racism, but it could be a different social indicator as well. Being able to model that for young children, and so young children can center justice versus their right to comfort, because we do have this idea, it's actually a white supremacy characteristic of the right to comfort, where everyone wants to have this right to comfort. And then what that happens is then we start to self-soothe. And so we start taking bubble baths. I might be talking about myself here. We might drink wine at night. We might, go dark, eating ice cream. And so now we're self-soothing. And when you get into a stage of self-soothing, that means you're disengaged from any kind of justice or advocacy work. So we have to get to a place where we say, this is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling it for right now. And it's okay that I feel it. I want to move forward through it so that I can continue to sustain my advocacy work, my justice work, my activism.
I'm actually, that's such a beautiful point. And a totally separate point, but I do want to address it, which is, making sure your kids feel safe, that your emotional experience is your own and you're going to be fine and you can take care of yourself, is different from, there are times when you should feel a little crappy and ashamed. And that's part of what makes us human beings. We need to activate ourselves, say, I don't like how this feels. So what do I need to change in my life to not feel this way? And it may be that you need to restructure your entire belief system right now. That may be what's happening for a lot of white people, is like, we don't need to feel better, in the sense that, like, this experience should have us have a sense of like, what the hell? But it also can activate you to change things. What is different is that your kids still need to know you're okay. You're okay sitting with that discomfort. And actually, it's a gift for kids.
And oftentimes, like, young children will ask questions, and their biggest question is, am I safe? Like, right. By them trying to figure out, are you safe? They just want to know, am I safe? right? And especially if you have Black children, Indigenous children, children of color, you know, that we can put our hand on their heart and say, you have breath in your lungs and you are safe in this moment, right? And just being able to comfort them in that way. And then as white children become a little bit older, it's, you have a sense of safety because you receive immunity. I think it was Peggy McIntosh who coined white privilege, maybe not. But Dr. Nolan has this great TED Talk where he talks about white immunity. And it was just so mind-blowing to me because privilege is kind of a misnomer, I think, but having immunity of the way you can walk through the world or move through the world to be more inclusive. And you're just immune to some of to a lot of the experiences and the marginalization.
May I ask a question, which is, I know a lot of comments in social media where, you know, you're complicit if you're silent, you have to work to try. Please don't take the time of Black educators to educate white people. Do your own research. How, and do you have some good resources that you can recommend that we can publish, so we are bringing conversation and illumination to the table, but also continuing the education, and hearing that request of like, you do the work?
Yes. Okay, so I'm a teacher, so y'all know I like books. So I've come with my book stack. Before I show the books, I just want to, and this is my own pitfall. What I tell folks all the time is, look, I went to public schools, K-12. I grew up, born and raised. I'm a U.S. citizen, went to U.S.-based schools. So I was socialized in all of the same history and learning in white supremacy culture as everyone else. And so a lot of this has been me doing my own work and me unlearning. And a pitfall for me was staying in that awareness stage and not moving into analysis of, you know, why do I believe what I believe, and do I still believe that? But most importantly, move to action. So just, you know, for those that are listening, those that are watching, awareness is our first stage, and we have to start there. And that liberatory consciousness framework by Dr. Barbara J. Love, but we want to get to that accountable allyship. So my first book, We Live for the We by Danny McClain. I'm going to show it there. This book has to be my favorite book of the year and of last year. The Political Power of Black Motherhood. And so I know we're speaking to a lot of caregivers, and it really gives us a political perspective on how mothering is such an act of resistance for all of us, anyone that partakes in mothering. And she uses the term very inclusive, anyone that cares for another child.
Yeah.
Is a good one. Me and White Supremacy. Of course, I mean, this one is just, it's a beautiful playbook. Just takes you right through so many of the pitfalls. It offers you language. It gives you a framework. If you're brand new to this conversation though, and you're like, whoa, racism, how does it manifest and how does it impact me? Start with So You Want to Talk About Race.
Mm-hmm.
Tiffany Jewell and I did this as one of our anti-racist book clubs on Instagram. It was a huge hit. The chapter about stereotypes and why stereotypes are so harmful was mind-blowing for me. And then I have another one, my last one. Oh, I have a little sticky note for my child. Motherhood So White, a memoir of race, gender, and parenting in America. She is a single Black mother who adopted. And so it just offered another perspective that, like, even for me, I don't have that perspective. So these are great books to start awareness. You can read the book. They're all written by women of the Black diaspora. And so it offers you a different gaze. And also when we talk about embracing accurate language, it's going to have the most accurate language because it's the people of this said community writing about our experiences.
So we will make a comprehensive list of those books for people to get, as well as the children's book you recommended, which I cannot wait to get. And if there's any other children's books, which is, it's just my lane. I've read 4 books a week, which, to my kids since birth, and I'm constantly trying to search out new, and it's just an art form that I have personally found a lot of comfort in. The artistry, the poetry, the lessons, the gentleness, but without lacking in life skills. Children's books are a world as a parent that I find a lot of safety. So I would love if you could give us a few more recommendations we can post.
Okay, y'all ready?
Yeah.
Books, I'm the same way. I love books, and I think especially if you are feeling really activated with energy before you have tough conversations, books are a beautiful gateway. Having the conversation with young children and posing the question in such a third person point of view.
Yes.
So right now, I think a book that's great for the time, it's called The Little Book of Little Activist.
Oh, that's amazing.
And the pictures.
Yes.
And all of young children and their signs. And so this is a great book to read through with young children and say, would you like to make a sign today? So that's a good one. The next book that I have is that another thing to start with, and this was a big aha for myself, and this has really been how I've created my teaching practice is, hey, I'm just going to share what was working for me, and I'm going to be vulnerable and share my pitfalls. And one of the things I had to realize is when I was going through my classroom collection of books, and I looked at the books that represented the children of color, that oftentimes it was children of color experiencing oppression, Ruby Bridges or Harriet Tubman, Sylvia Mendez. And it wasn't showing children of color just doing everyday things, having everyday problems. And that was an issue. So I have a book, there's a series called Anna and Andrew. This is a great series, and it follows Anna and Andrew and their adventures at home.
Fantastic.
There's another one, Looking for Bongo, which is a really cute, fun one. And again, it shows, and you know what, do we have a couple minutes so I can show a couple things about this book I really like?
Yes, absolutely.
So typically I get a lot of requests for book lists, and I tell people, leave the book lists, leave them alone, because it's so important for you to do the internal work. And the books that you choose reflect your soul. They reflect where you're at, they reflect your learning, but they should also reflect you for your children. Like you're looking and you're saying, where am I lacking in representation in my home? So let me collect some of these books. Or where does my child, when I ask them those questions about what's the best part of you? What do you like about your skin tone? And if they have a negative reaction, then we know, okay, I need to try to affirm my child in that way. So when you're selecting books, it's really important to look for an author of this said community, do a quick Google search, and we're like, okay, yes, they're of this said community, they're representing the community, but we can't stop there. It's also important to look inside, and as you already said, the artistry of the illustrations, illustrations really need to be beautiful, they need to be meaningful, but we're also going to dig into a little bit deeper, like this. It shows him and his mom and his sister, and she's getting her hair done. We have to be aware of stereotypes. There's a stereotype in the Black community that Black men are absent in the household. And so we want to push against that stereotype, but in a very developmental appropriate way. So here he is at home, and he's asking his dad, do you know where a bongo is? These are like small things that we can do so that our children can draw a more accurate conclusion. Because if we leave them up to their own devices to draw conclusions from what media shows them or society, they will draw inaccurate conclusions. It shows that Abuela is at home answering. So we have a mom, a dad, a grandma. So it's an intergenerational household. They live in an apartment because there's looks like the UPS guy. So it's showing so many different layers, beautiful things that we don't often see in a book. And then
everyday life.
everyday life. And they're actually, and the book is representing Afro-Latinos. And so you have a little bit of Spanish. So it shows off of that full diaspora of what does it mean to be Black? So those are just some tips about looking for a book that I wanted to run through with y'all.
Well, speaking of, there is an amazing book named The Crown, and we're going to be speaking with the author and illustrator next week, Derek Barnes and Gordon C. James. And I just marveled over this book. It's beautiful, it's poetic, and I do believe that the visual emotionality that comes out of a book is very important, and it can be soul shifting and really take you on this journey and breed an optimism and a romanticism and a poetry in that. So children's books for me have been such an important tool with my children, and because I am not a teacher, I am a student. And part of why I wanted to embark on this and take Aliza's hand in what felt very intimidating for both of us, which is why we called everything out, that we thought was stating the obvious because we were aware of ourselves, is that I am here on this planet to learn. I will be learning my whole life, and as I pass on, and maybe even then some. And the only way I want to come at things with a comfort and a humility is to say I'm learning. And if Aliza and I are lucky enough to learn from someone like you and learn with you and shine a light on that for other people without, taking up the time as we're not supposed to do, but, we're all just well-intendedly trying to be a part of this important time and be better parents and raise kids that are going to make the world a different place. And I feel so lucky that the one person we mentioned last week, that Aliza mentioned last week, we get to talk to this week. I cannot thank you enough for your time. We are both ever so grateful, and may this be an ongoing friendship, as they say in Casablanca. May this be the beginning of a beautiful friendship, please. Aliza has spoken so highly of you.
Many exciting questions for having you on the podcast. I'm desperate to ask you things, or just keep them. I don't want to keep them for myself. But.
Yeah, and I want to listen to that podcast and let this be the beginning of an ongoing, education for us all. And without being too assuming, I just want to hang out and continue this. This is not a one-off for me.
Can you
later.
Take your class online at this? Can your seminars and workshops be done virtually?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on it right now to have them ready to go for July. I have a Patreon, which is a group of anti-racist educators. We're all working together, figuring out how do we actually apply this in the classroom, whether in person or virtually, so folks can join my Patreon. And every month I do host a webinar, and I have a guest speaker and someone that, again, I love how, Drew, you said, I'm a student, and I feel, again, those roles are so fluid, right? You just go from learner to expert interchangeably, even in the same conversation. But those will be up soon, ready to go on my website.
And when they are, we will also call that out and let everybody know. And when you do your podcast, you guys will let everybody know, and we'll just keep this ongoing, if I may.
And hopefully our schools will make sure that they have, everybody's been working with you, right?
Hopefully. My goal is for every school to be trained in the anti-bias, anti-racist framework. There's so many incredible ABAR organizations and trainers out there across the country. And so just getting that information out that this is a thing, and it's good business. It humanizes all of us. We want this for our children. And to know that if racism was learned, that it can be unlearned. And I am so hopeful that it can be unlearned and we can like end this with this generation, you know, just that optimism.
Well, you have two new friends. Thank you. We are honored and privileged to get to call you our friend, and we will, like Eliza is right, this has to be ongoing in our schools. You have so much to bring into this world. You have been, you're ongoing. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for using your platform to have the conversation, putting yourself out there. And, you know, so many people start an email or the conversation with me to say, I'm sorry, I'm late. And I'm like, hey, you're here. Like, let's go. Let's move forward. The party started and you showed up. So let's get moving. So, you know, thank y'all. Thank you for using your platform.